The trade station of Carrion was always alive with noise. Ships came and went every hour, carrying goods from faraway planets. Stalls filled the wide corridors, selling food, weapons, crystals, and things that humans could barely imagine. Lights flickered in dozens of colors, and every language of the galaxy echoed through the air. Commander Elias Vey, one of the very few humans who traveled this far, walked slowly through the marketplace. He was tall compared to most of the species here, and his simple jacket and boots made him look plain, yet his eyes were sharp. He carried no weapons in sight, but there was something about the way he moved that made others step aside. Elias was not here to buy treasures or rare spices. He liked to walk the crowded stations to understand how different people lived. It was his way of learning the galaxy by looking, listening, and sometimes asking. He had seen many markets before, some honest, some filled with crime. But today he felt something different in the air. At the far end of the market, away from the main shops, he heard laughter, cruel laughter, the kind that made his skin tighten. Curious, Elias turned the corner and found a crowd gathered around a small stall. The stall was nothing more than a wooden frame covered with a glowing cloth. Behind it stood a tall alien with scales that shimmered green under the lights. His voice was loud as he called to the crowd, "Come closer, see the greatest bargain in the stars. A royal for the price of dust." The crowd howled with laughter. Some threw coins on the ground, mocking the figure sitting quietly in chains at the center of the stall. Elias stopped. His eyes narrowed. The figure was a woman, an alien, but her form was graceful in a way that humans could understand. Her skin was pale blue, glowing faintly like moonlight. Her eyes were golden yet dull, as if life had been drained from them. She wore torn garments that might once have been fine robes but now looked dirty and ragged. Shackles bound her wrists and a heavy chain ran to the stall post. The merchant shouted again. "1 credit, just 1. Who wants her? Not even worth more than water. But she can cook, clean, or decorate your hall like a pretty statue. Come, who dares waste a single coin for her?" The aliens around him jeered. One shouted, "Too much for trash." Another said, "She is cursed. Her people threw her away." Others laughed harder. Elias felt his jaw tighten. He had seen slavery before, though most of the galaxy claimed it was illegal. Still, in the shadows of trade stations, the cruel practice survived. But never had he seen someone mocked like this. Offered not for riches, but for almost nothing, as if her very worth was an insult. He stepped closer. The crowd noticed him now. A few whispered, "A human." What will he do? Humans were rare here, known as unpredictable and dangerous. Some races feared them, some respected them, but all agreed. Humans did not think like others. Elias ignored the whispers. He looked at the woman. She lifted her eyes slightly and met his gaze. For a moment there was no fear, only a quiet question in her golden eyes. "Will you mock me too?" The merchant noticed his interest and grinned. "Ah, human. You have eyes for her? 1 credit, that's all. Buy her, take her, do what you like. 1 credit cheaper than air." The crowd laughed again. Elias reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small metal coin, the currency accepted across most stations. He held it up so all could see. 1 credit, he said in a calm voice. The laughter grew louder. "He's buying her. The human is buying the cursed woman." But Elias did not smile. He placed the coin on the stall and looked directly at the merchant. "I'll take her, but not as property. I'm setting her free." The laughter stopped. The air grew heavy. The merchant blinked. "What did you say?" Elias spoke louder, his voice firm. "I said she is free now. The coin is yours. The chains are mine to break." Gasps rose from the crowd. No one had expected this. Buying a slave to use was one thing, but buying one only to free them? That was madness in their eyes. The merchant tried to laugh. "Human, you waste your money. She is nothing. She has no value." Elias stepped forward, his voice cold. "Then why are you afraid to release her?" The merchant's smile faded. The crowd whispered. Some began to shift uncomfortably. They were not used to humans, but they remembered stories. Stories of humans who fought against impossible odds, who stood firm even when entire armies opposed them. With a growl, the merchant unlocked the shackles and pushed the woman toward Elias. "Take her then. She is yours or no one's. Curse you, human." The woman stumbled, but Elias caught her gently. Her wrists were bruised from the chains. She looked up at him with wide eyes, confused and uncertain. "You're free," he said quietly. "No one owns you now." The crowd began to murmur. Some laughed nervously, others shook their heads. A few even left quickly, as if fearing trouble would follow this strange act. Elias guided the woman away from the stall, ignoring the merchant's glare. He could feel the woman's hesitation, her steps unsteady. She did not pull away, but neither did she thank him. Her face showed only deep mistrust. They walked through the market in silence. Behind them, whispers spread like fire. The human freed her. The human wasted his coin. The human is mad. When they reached a quieter hall, Elias finally spoke. "Do you have a name?" The woman hesitated, then answered in a soft voice. "Lyra. Lyra," Elias repeated. "I'm Elias. I don't want anything from you. You're free to go where you want." She looked at him sharply, as if his words were dangerous. "Free?" she asked. Her voice carried disbelief. "Yes," Elias said simply. "No chains, no price, freedom." For a long time she stared at him as if trying to see through his eyes. Then she whispered, "No one believes in freedom." "Not here. Humans do," Elias replied. "At least we try to." Before more could be said, voices echoed from behind. Harsh, heavy footsteps approached, the sound of armed boots. Elias turned his head slightly, his instincts alert. The woman tensed beside him. "They followed us," she whispered. "Who?" Elias asked quietly. Her golden eyes darkened. "The ones who sold me. They will not allow me to walk free. You should have left me there." Elias's lips curved into a thin smile. "I don't walk away from what's right." The footsteps grew closer, and Elias knew that the simple act of spending 1 credit had already placed him on a dangerous path. But he did not regret it. Not for a moment. For in that single act he had seen something more than just a woman in chains. He had seen the cruelty of a galaxy that had forgotten dignity, and he had chosen in his human way to defy it. And that choice was only the beginning. The sound of boots echoed louder with every second. Elias and Lyra stood in the narrow corridor of the trade station. The walls were dimly lit and the smell of metal and oil hung in the air. Elias's hand twitched near his belt, though he carried no obvious weapon. His eyes stayed sharp, scanning the shadows. Lyra's golden eyes glowed faintly in the dark. She pressed back against the wall, her breath quick and nervous. The chain marks on her wrists looked fresh and her robes were still torn. Yet something in her posture hinted at strength. Strength she tried hard to hide. "They're here," she whispered. Elias glanced at her. "How many?" "Too many," she said. "And they won't stop. You should leave me. I bring nothing but trouble." Elias shook his head. "I didn't free you to abandon you." Before she could reply, the hunters appeared. 3 figures stepped into the corridor, their armor clanking, their eyes glowing behind visors. They carried stun rifles, weapons made for capturing, not killing. Behind them, more shadows moved. The lead hunter sneered when he saw Lyra. "There she is, the lost jewel, and the human fool who thinks he can keep her." The second hunter laughed. "1 credit for a princess. That's cheaper than dirt." Lyra flinched at the word princess, but Elias noticed. He said nothing. He only stepped slightly in front of her, shielding her with his broad frame. "She's free," Elias said firmly. "She's no one's property anymore." The lead hunter raised his weapon. "You don't understand, human. She's not just property. She's dangerous, and she belongs to powerful people who don't want her walking free." "Powerful people don't scare me," Elias replied. His voice was calm, but the hunters sensed the steel in his tone. One of them fired without warning. A bolt of blue energy shot through the air. Elias moved fast, pulling Lyra down as the blast struck the wall, burning a black mark. The corridor exploded with sound, blaster fire, shouts, and sparks flying from the metal walls. Elias grabbed a metal rod from the floor, swinging it with surprising strength. He struck the nearest hunter across the chest, knocking him down. Lyra gasped, not from fear, but from the way Elias fought with nothing but a piece of scrap metal. He moved like someone used to surviving against stronger foes. Another blast struck near Lyra's feet. She stumbled, her eyes wide. Instinct rose in her chest, an instinct she had buried for too long. Her hands glowed faintly, threads of golden light wrapping around her fingers. She clenched them tightly, trying to stop the glow. Not yet. Not here, not in front of him, but the hunters were closing in. Elias fought hard, but there were too many. He struck another with the rod, but a third hunter fired and caught Elias on the shoulder. The human staggered, teeth clenched in pain. Lyra's heart pounded. She could not stay silent anymore. Her hands shot forward and a wave of golden energy burst from her palms. The light struck the hunters like a storm, slamming them into the walls. Their weapons flew from their hands, clattering across the floor. Sparks danced in the air. The corridor fell silent. The hunters groaned on the ground, stunned and unable to rise. Elias turned, breathing heavily. His shoulder smoked from the burn, but his eyes were fixed on Lyra. She stood trembling, her hands still glowing faintly. Her golden eyes were bright now, no longer dull. They shone like suns. Elias didn't speak for a moment. He just looked at her, realizing what she had hidden. "You're not just a prisoner," he said softly. "You're something more." Lyra looked away, ashamed. "You shouldn't have seen that. Now you'll understand why they want me chained." "I understand," Elias said. His voice was calm, steady. "But I'm not afraid." She stared at him, confused. "Everyone is afraid. My power brings fear, not trust." "Not to me," Elias said simply. For the first time, her lips parted as if she wanted to believe him. But before she could answer, shouts echoed from the far corridor. More hunters were coming. "Move," Elias said, pulling her gently but firmly. They ran through the twisting halls of the station, the sound of boots and alarms chasing them. Elias knew the station well enough to avoid the main routes. He led her through service tunnels, storage rooms, and narrow stairways. At last, they reached a quiet corner near the docking bay. Elias leaned against the wall, his injured shoulder burning. He pressed his hand over it, wincing. Lyra stepped closer. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," Elias said. She shook her head. Her hands glowed again, but this time the light was softer, warm. She touched his shoulder, and the burn began to fade. Elias stiffened, surprised by the sudden warmth flowing through him. The pain lessened until it was only a dull ache. He looked at her in silence. "You can heal," he said. "Among other things," she replied quietly. Elias gave a small smile. "That's useful." Lyra blinked, confused again. "You're not asking why. You're not asking who I am." "You'll tell me when you're ready," Elias said. "I don't need to push." Her golden eyes studied him carefully. In her life, she had seen nothing but chains, betrayal, and fear. Yet this human, this stranger, treated her as if her power did not make her a monster, but a person for the first time in years. Lyra felt something stir in her chest, something close to hope. They moved again, slipping toward the docking bay. Elias's small ship waited there, a simple human vessel with scratched metal and worn engines. It was no royal cruiser, but it looked alive, reliable, and free. As they approached, more hunters appeared, blocking the path. Lyra tensed, ready to unleash her power again, but Elias raised his hand. "Stay behind me," he said. She frowned. "You can't fight them all." "Maybe not," Elias said. "But humans don't stop just because we can't win easily." The hunters charged. Elias fought with everything he had, striking with fists, elbows, and the same metal rod he had carried. He moved with raw determination even when outnumbered. Lyra could not hold back. She joined him, her golden light flaring brighter than before. She sent waves of energy that knocked the hunters off their feet, but carefully controlled them so she did not kill. Together, human strength and alien power forced the enemies to retreat. When the last hunter fell, Elias opened the hatch of his ship. Inside now, they hurried aboard. The engines roared to life, and the ship lifted from the docking bay just as more hunters arrived. Blaster fire struck the shields, but the ship pushed through, breaking free into the black sea of stars. Inside the cockpit, Elias sat at the controls, breathing hard. His shoulder still ached, but he forced his hand steady. Lyra sat beside him, her golden eyes glowing softly in the dim light. "You risked everything," she said. "For me?" Elias glanced at her. "I told you, you're free now. And freedom is worth the risk." She looked down at her hands, at the light that still shimmered faintly. "No one has ever said that to me before." Elias smiled faintly. "Then it's about time someone did." The ship flew into the endless stars, leaving the station and the hunters behind. But Lyra knew the danger was far from over. Her enemies would never stop searching, and yet for the first time she felt less afraid. Because beside her was a human who saw not her curse but her worth. It was a beginning, a fragile, uncertain beginning, but a beginning nonetheless. The stars stretched endlessly outside the small window of the ship. Millions of lights glittered across the black sea of space, each one a distant sun, each one holding worlds of mystery. Elias sat at the controls, his hands steady as he guided the vessel away from the trade station. The hum of the engines was constant, a low vibration that filled the cabin with calm rhythm. Lyra sat quietly in the co-pilot's seat. Her golden eyes watched the stars, but her thoughts were far away. She had been silent since they left the station. The glow of her hands was gone now, but the memory of using her power lingered heavily in her chest. She had spent years hiding it, fearing it, but in one moment of desperation it had revealed itself before this strange human. She expected fear from him. She expected disgust. She expected the same words others had used before: cursed, dangerous, unworthy. Yet Elias had said none of those things. He had simply looked at her with calm eyes and said, "I'm not afraid." Still, she did not fully believe. Elias broke the silence at last. "We'll head for the outer lanes. Less traffic, fewer patrols. They won't track us as easily there." Lyra glanced at him. "You seem very sure." "I've been chased before," Elias said with a faint smile. "Different enemies, same game. Survival is about staying one step ahead." She tilted her head slightly. "And when you cannot, then you fight until you can." Lyra looked at him for a long moment, then returned her gaze to the stars. His words sounded simple, yet carried a strange strength. Hours passed as the ship drifted through quiet routes. Elias finally set the controls to autopilot and leaned back in his chair. His shoulders still ached faintly where the hunter's blast had hit him. "You should rest," he said. Lyra frowned. "Rest?" "Yes, sleep. You've been through a lot." Her lips pressed into a thin line. Sleep was something she had not known in peace for many years. But she obeyed his suggestion and moved to the back cabin. The small room held only a narrow bunk, a storage locker, and a faint light. Yet compared to the chains she had known, it felt like a palace. She lay down carefully, staring at the ceiling. The word he used, free, echoed in her mind. Could freedom be real, or was it just another trick, another chain in disguise? Her body trembled as old memories returned. A throne room filled with light, voices of advisors whispering betrayal, a sudden ambush, chains, laughter, and exile. Then the endless humiliation of being sold, mocked, and offered for less than water. Her eyes burned with tears, but she forced them away. Freedom was too heavy, too painful, when she did not know if it would last. When morning came, if morning could exist in the endless night of space, Elias was already awake, checking the ship's systems. Lyra joined him quietly, her expression calm but her eyes watchful. "I owe you an explanation," she said at last. Elias turned to her. "Only if you want to give one." She studied him, confused again by his lack of demand. Then she spoke. "My name is Lyra Tear. I was born heir to the throne of the Sereth dynasty. My people ruled for centuries, not with weapons, but with knowledge and energy. We guided many systems into peace. But power breeds envy. My cousin betrayed me. He spread lies, turned allies into enemies, and struck when I was unguarded. I was taken, stripped of name and right, and sold like an object. The price they gave me, one credit, was meant as an insult, a way to erase my worth." Her voice trembled, but she forced herself to continue. "My power, it is the gift of my line. Energy flows through me. Some call it light, some call it curse. My cousin feared it. He told others it would bring ruin if I lived. And so they bound me." Silence filled the cabin. Elias listened carefully, his expression thoughtful but not shocked. "So that's why the hunters wanted you back," he said. "Yes," Lyra whispered. "They will not rest. If I return to Serath, my cousin will kill me. If I hide, he will hunt me. Freedom for me is an illusion." Elias shook his head slowly. "Not an illusion. Hard, yes. Costly, yes. But real if you choose it." She looked at him frustrated. "You speak of choice as if it is simple. You are human. You believe in such things, but I was raised in chains of duty and now chains of shame." Elias leaned forward slightly. His voice was calm, steady. "Where I come from, we believe freedom is not given. It is taken. You fight for it, hold it, protect it. No one can hand it to you. Not even me. You have to claim it yourself." Her golden eyes flickered. His words felt heavy but also true. For a while they flew in silence. Then alarms flashed on the console. Elias cursed under his breath. "They found us." A ship appeared on the scanner, sleek, dark, and faster than his. Hunters again. Elias pushed the engines, swerving into an asteroid field. The small vessel dodged between rocks, the hull rattling with each sharp turn. Blaster fire followed them. bolts of energy striking the stones and exploding in bright flashes. Lyra gripped the seat, her eyes wide. You can't outrun them forever. Then we'll outfight them, Elias said. The hunters drew closer. One blast struck the ship's side, shaking the cabin violently. Sparks burst from the console. Elias fought to steady the controls, but the hunters were too fast. They aimed for the engines. One more hit and the ship would be crippled. Lyra's chest tightened. Fear rose in her, but so did something else, resolve. She stood, her hands glowing again. She pressed them against the wall of the ship, closing her eyes. Energy surged through her veins, connecting with the ship's systems. The faint lights of the vessel brightened and the engines roared with sudden strength. Elias's eyes widened as the controls responded with power beyond normal. What did you... Fly, Lyra said through clenched teeth. I'll give you the strength. Elias did not hesitate. He pushed the ship forward, weaving through the asteroids with renewed speed. The hunters tried to follow, but the boosted engines gave them no chance. Elias spun through narrow gaps, twisted around massive rocks, and finally dove into a dense cluster that confused the scanners. Moments later, the hunters disappeared from view. The radar cleared. Elias pulled the ship out of the asteroid field, breathing hard. Lyra collapsed into the chair beside him, her glow fading. You used your power again, Elias said quietly. She nodded weakly. It was the only way. You saved us, she looked down. And now you see why they fear me. Why they call me cursed. Power like this does not belong in anyone's hands, Elias frowned. You're wrong. Power itself isn't evil. It's what you choose to do with it. You chose to save us, not destroy. That matters. Her eyes lifted slowly to his. In his voice there was no fear, no disgust, only steady belief. Lyra felt her chest tighten. For years she had carried the weight of her gift as a burden. But in Elias's eyes she saw not a curse but a chance. Perhaps freedom was more than running. Perhaps freedom was choosing how to use what she had been given. The thought frightened her, but also filled her with strength. As the ship sailed quietly once more, she whispered to herself almost too softly for Elias to hear. Maybe. I can claim it. Elias glanced at her but said nothing. He only smiled faintly, knowing that her journey had just begun. The blackness of space stretched endlessly outside the ship's viewport, dotted with tiny stars that twinkled like distant promises. Elias and Lyra had been flying in silence for hours, letting the hum of the engines soothe their nerves after the last attack. Yet both knew the peace would not last long. Lyra sat quietly, her golden eyes focused on the stars. Elias watched her from the pilot's seat, noticing the tension in her shoulders. You've done well, he said finally. You saved us back there. She shook her head. I only reacted. I did not save anything deliberately. Power is instinct. It does not reason. Elias smiled faintly. Maybe, but knowing when to use it, that takes choice. And you chose to protect. That counts. For the first time, she looked at him with something like respect. Not fear, not suspicion, but a quiet acknowledgement. She had met many who had feared her power, many who had mocked or hated her. Few had treated her as a person first. Elias, she said softly, if my enemies catch up, we will not survive. You must know this. I know, Elias replied. And if they do, we'll fight. Together. The words hung between them, simple but powerful. Hours later, the radar flickered with sudden movement. Another ship appeared, this one larger, sleek and menacing. Its hull was dark, reflecting no light. It moved fast, its trajectory aimed straight for them. They've found us, Lyra whispered. Elias nodded. They're persistent. That's not a surprise. The new attackers opened fire immediately. Blue energy bolts struck the hull, shaking the ship violently. Sparks flew across the console. Elias gritted his teeth, maneuvering sharply. Hang on, he shouted. This is going to be rough. Lyra's hands glowed faintly at her sides. She had not expected to fight again so soon. Yet as she looked at Elias, her resolve hardened. Fear could not rule her anymore, not with him beside her. She placed her hands on the wall of the ship, feeling the currents of energy running through the metal. With a deep breath, she released a wave of golden light. It surged through the ship, strengthening the engines, shielding the hull, and illuminating the cockpit with a warm glow. Elias's eyes widened. That's incredible. It is necessary, she said. I will not let them take us. The ship accelerated, weaving through asteroid clusters, dodging incoming fire. The enemy pursued relentlessly, but Lyra's energy gave them an advantage. The attackers struggled to keep up, their weapons failing against the enhanced shields. For hours they fought this way. Lyra's powers and Elias's skillful piloting complemented each other. Every time a hunter struck, she responded with energy. Every time they needed an escape, Elias found it. Yet the continuous strain was taking a toll. Lyra's glow began to fade slightly, and Elias's hands ached from the constant control of the ship. Finally, they reached a dense nebula, a swirling mass of gas and light. Elias guided the ship inside. The colorful clouds distorted sensors and visuals, hiding them from their pursuers. The ship drifted quietly, engines humming softly as they moved deeper into the mist. Inside the cockpit, silence fell. Both of them were breathing heavily. Elias wiped sweat from his brow. "That was close," he said. "You have no idea," Lyra replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I cannot control this power fully yet. Every surge drains me." "You're learning," Elias said. "And you're stronger than you think." She shook her head. "Strength is not enough. They will come again, and next time I may not be able to stop them." Elias leaned closer. "Then we'll fight again. That's what humans do. And I'll fight beside you." As the nebula thickened, the golden light from Lyra's hand slowly returned. She realized that fear was no longer her master. Each time she used her power to protect, she felt a sense of control she had never experienced before. Elias noticed the change. "You're holding yourself differently," he said. "More confidence. You're not just reacting, you're choosing." Lyra looked at him uncertain. "I feel different, stronger, but also vulnerable. I do not know if I can trust this feeling." "Trust it anyway," Elias said. "You've survived because of choice and courage, not because of hiding." The nebula cleared, revealing open space once more. But ahead a fleet of ships emerged, surrounding them from all sides. They were larger, heavily armed, and organized. Lyra's heart sank. "We're outnumbered," she whispered. "Doesn't matter," Elias replied calmly. "We'll make them pay for underestimating a human and his companion." The first ship fired. Lyra reacted instinctively, sending a wave of energy that struck the attackers, knocking the lead vessel backward. Sparks and fire streaked through space as the other ships struggled to maintain formation. Elias used the opportunity to maneuver through the fleet. The smaller ship darted between larger vessels, dodging fire and weaving through the chaos. Lyra kept her hands glowing, each wave of energy carefully aimed to disrupt the attackers without destroying them completely. They were a team now, human skill and alien power. And they were unstoppable together. Yet one ship, faster and larger than the others, approached directly. Lyra's eyes widened. The energy required to stop it would drain her completely. "You must stay back," Elias said. "This one's too close. Let me handle it." "I cannot," Lyra said firmly. "If it hits the hull, we both die. I have to help." Together, they released a combined wave of energy and force. The blast struck the ship, tearing through its hull and sending it spinning into the void. The other attackers paused, momentarily stunned by the display of power. Elias and Lyra took advantage of the pause. The ship surged forward, leaving the remaining fleet behind. For the first time in hours, the cockpit was quiet. Lyra slumped in her seat, exhausted. Her glow faded completely, leaving her pale and trembling. Elias placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said softly. "You saved us both. I almost lost control," she whispered. "I do not know if I can do this again." "You will," Elias replied. "You just need to believe in yourself." She looked at him, her golden eyes full of doubt and gratitude. "Why do you stay with me? Why risk everything for someone like me?" Elias smiled faintly. "Because no one deserves to be sold for one credit. And because humans believe in freedom even when it seems impossible." Her chest tightened. For the first time in her life, someone believed in her. Not in her power, not in her title, but in her. The ship continued through the stars, leaving the attackers far behind. Lyra leaned back, feeling the exhaustion but also a new sense of purpose. She had survived not just with power, but with trust and courage. Elias watched her quietly. He had seen countless beings in danger, but few had the strength Lyra carried, not just physical or energetic, but the strength to survive betrayal, mockery, and fear. That strength he knew could change worlds. "Lyra," he said finally, You are more than your past, more than your power. You are free to choose who you are. She looked at him, seeing not a human who was strange and unpredictable, but an ally, a friend, someone who could teach her the value of choice. And for the first time in years, Lyra allowed herself to hope. The stars stretched before them, endless and bright. Danger remained, enemies waited, but the bond they shared had grown. Together they could face the universe, human courage and alien power, united in the fire of the stars, and for now, that was enough. The stars stretched endlessly, but this time the blackness of space felt different. Elias and Lyra had survived countless dangers since leaving the trade station. Each encounter with hunters, ambushes, and powerful enemies had strengthened their bond. And now, as they approached Lyra's homeworld, the weight of the journey pressed upon them both, not as fear, but as responsibility. Lyra sat in the co-pilot's seat, her golden eyes scanning the planet below. The vibrant blues and greens of her world reminded her of what she had lost. Forested valleys, shimmering rivers, and cities of luminous towers reflected sunlight like a sea of jewels. Yet her heart trembled. She knew her cousin awaited, plotting to seize the throne she had once been promised. He would not welcome her return. Elias noticed her tension. "It's your world," he said softly. "Not theirs. You have the right to reclaim it," she shook her head. "I am no longer a princess, not officially. They call me a traitor. They call me cursed. If I go, I risk everything, including my life." Elias leaned forward, resting a hand lightly on her arm. "Then we go carefully. Not recklessly. And you do it as yourself, not as who they claim you are. You're stronger than you think." For a long moment she met his gaze. His calm certainty, so rare among humans, made her feel grounded. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. They landed on a hidden plateau outside the capital city. The valley below glittered with energy fields, security forces, and watchtowers. Hunters loyal to her cousin had already taken positions throughout the city. But Elias and Lyra had no choice. They needed to act before her enemies discovered her return. Elias surveyed the area. "We go in stages. First, we expose the truth about your cousin. Then you reclaim your position, and I'll be beside you the whole way." She nodded, a sense of determination rising.
"And if we fail?"
"We won't," Elias said simply. They moved under the cover of night, slipping past patrols and guards. Lyra's powers allowed them to manipulate small energy fields, masking their presence from scanners and observers. Elias's knowledge of tactical movements, learned from years of surviving hostile encounters, guided their route. At last, they reached the city's central council building. Massive towers of crystalline light loomed above them. Inside, the council, a group of wise elders and administrators, waited. They had been deceived by Lyra's cousin for years, believing she was gone forever. Elias and Lyra entered quietly. She raised her hands slightly, not in threat, but in recognition of her authority. The council members gasped, startled by her presence. "Lyra?" one elder whispered. "Yes," she said firmly. "I have returned, and I have proof of my cousin's betrayal. He sold lies, plotted against the dynasty, and attempted to erase my right to rule." Holographic images and recordings appeared, sent from the ship Elias had prepared. They showed intercepted messages, stolen orders, and evidence of her cousin's conspiracy. The council murmured, astonished. Elias stepped back, letting Lyra speak. "You see the truth," she continued. "I do not seek revenge. I seek justice for the people and the dynasty. My cousin has endangered the world with his deceit. I ask you now to recognize my claim not as a title but as the rightful leader who serves her people." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then one elder stood. "The evidence is clear. The council recognizes Lyra Taylor as the rightful heir. She will take her place and restore balance to our world." Lyra's chest tightened with emotion. She had dreamed of this moment for years, yet reality was more profound than any dream. She turned to Elias, gratitude and pride shining in her eyes. "You did this," she said softly. "No," Elias replied. "You did. I only helped you see what was already true." The next weeks were filled with preparation. Lyra reclaimed her throne not with violence but with demonstration of wisdom, courage, and transparency. Elias remained at her side, helping coordinate strategies, train loyal guards, and establish security measures. His presence brought stability, a reminder that humans could bring strength not only through force but through principle. Yet, Despite her regained power, Lyra did not forget the lessons she had learned on the journey. Freedom, she realized, was not a gift or a title. It was a choice, a responsibility she carried for herself and for her people. The palace, once a place of betrayal and fear, now buzzed with cautious optimism. Citizens and allies who had doubted her returned, inspired by the courage she had shown. Lyra worked tirelessly to rebuild trust and governance, her energy flowing not as a weapon but as a source of guidance and protection. Elias observed quietly. He had seen many worlds in chaos, but few where hope returned so completely. Humans, he thought, had a strange way of showing courage, not by ruling, not by dominating, but by choosing what is right, even when it is dangerous. One evening, after a long day of councils and speeches, Lyra and Elias stood on a balcony overlooking the city. The sunset bathed the towers in warm gold and violet light, reflecting off the rivers and streets like scattered jewels. "You've done more than I expected," Lyra said softly. "You've done more than anyone could expect," Elias replied. She laughed lightly, the sound soft and free. "And yet, you refuse the throne, the honor, everything my people offer." "I do not need a throne," Elias said. "Humans do not fight for crowns. We fight for what is right, and my place is beside you, not above you." Her golden eyes studied him, admiration and something deeper shining through. "I offered you everything, and yet you choose nothing but principle." "That is remarkable." "It's simple," Elias said. "I believe in freedom. I believe in choice. And I believe in doing the right thing no matter the cost." She looked at him, truly seeing him for the first time, not as a strange human, not as an ally, but as someone whose spirit mirrored her own ideals. She realized that the journey they had taken together had changed them both. Weeks passed. Lyra's world began to heal. Her cousin was exiled, stripped of power and held accountable for his betrayals. Trust returned to the people, and the dynasty was restored with wisdom and fairness. Elias prepared to leave. His ship was ready, and his duties as a human explorer called him back to the stars. Yet he did not leave silently. Lyra met him on the palace balcony one last time. "You changed my world," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You changed mine too," Elias replied. She extended her hand, not as a ruler offering command, but as a friend offering partnership. "Will you stay?" Elias shook his head with a faint smile. "I have my path, but our bond remains. Humans remember those who teach us courage, and I will not forget you." Lyra nodded. "Then let this be our legacy. Not crowns, not battles, but the courage to choose freedom and do what is right. Let the story of the human who spent one credit to free a queen be remembered." Elias laughed softly. "I never expected fame for one credit, but I'll accept it." They watched the sunset together, the city alive below them. The stars above seemed brighter, reflecting not just light, but the spirit of two beings who had survived, grown, and learned the true meaning of freedom. Months later, news of the event spread across the galaxy. The tale of the human who freed Lyra Tayar for a single credit became a story told in spaceports, trade stations, and distant planets. Humans were spoken of as unpredictable and courageous, willing to act for principle rather than profit. Lyra, now secure in her reign, often spoke of the human who had trusted her, believed in her, and stood by her side. Her people learned that freedom and courage were not gifts to be demanded, but choices to be lived. Elias continued his travels across the galaxy. Yet wherever he went, he carried the memory of Lyra's trust and the lessons of the journey. Courage, principle, and freedom. They were not just human traits, but universal truths, recognized and honored in beings across the stars. The galaxy had many rulers, many powerful beings, and many struggles, but none would forget the tale of the human who chose to free a queen for one credit, a choice that changed a world, and in the process, showed that even a single act of courage could light the darkness of countless lives. And in the quiet moments, far from the bustle of trade stations or the chaos of battle, Elias and Lyra looked to the stars, knowing that freedom, friendship, and courage were the true treasures of the universe.